I told David I slept with his brother and became the villain in every version of our story. People think they know what happened that night. The night he packed a suitcase, walked out, and paid a locksmith time and a half to change our locks as I pleaded in the hallway. They don't. The stakes were never about fidelity. David had been emotionally absent for 6 months, his body in our bed while his mind was somewhere I couldn't access. I was fighting to drag the truth into light, sacrificing my reputation to expose what he'd hidden. But everyone sees a cheater who got what she deserved. Here's why I confessed the texts, the receipt I found. But first, understand how we got there. David and I met at the worst possible time. I was 27, freshly dumped by my college boyfriend who decided to find himself in Thailand, code for find other women who don't ask about his drinking. David had just lost his mother to pancreatic cancer and was wearing his grief like a heavy coat he couldn't take off. We were casualties at the same house party. When I offered him the last beer from the bathtub ice, he looked at me like I'd handed him a life raft. He moved in 6 months later, bringing 3 boxes and a coffee maker that cost more than my car payment. That was David, minimalist where it didn't matter, extravagant where it did. He replaced my expired fire extinguisher, labeled the circuit breakers, bought organic vegetables I couldn't pronounce. For the first time since my dad left when I was 12, I felt someone building something with me instead of just parking in my life temporarily. Tyler crashed with us for what was supposed to be 3 days in March. He'd gotten a gig at a Brooklyn club and didn't want a hotel. David and I had been together 18 months then, past the honeymoon phase into comfortable routines. Tyler was different. Where David was structure, Tyler was chaos. He left guitar picks in the cereal and played until 3 a.m. I found myself staying up late to listen, telling myself it was just insomnia. Then David asked if Tyler was bothering me, and I said no too fast with too much conviction. His expression flickered for half a second, and I felt the temperature in our room suddenly drop. That was the first crack. The next morning, Tyler made coffee while David showered. He asked about my anxiety meds, about whether I was happy. I said yes to both, lying. When he left, he hugged me too long. David saw, his jaw tight. I laughed it off. He's your brother, I said. But I was lying again, and the weight of it settled in my stomach like a stone. Summer came, and David started working late. His tech firm was launching a new product. He'd come home smelling like office coffee, kiss my forehead, disappear into his office. I told myself this was partnership, giving space for ambition. But my anxiety started creeping back, and I began checking his phone. Just glances at first, when he was in the shower, to see if the screen lit up with messages. Then more systematically, scanning for names I didn't recognize, reading his email subject lines, checking his location through our shared family app. Each invasion felt justified by his distance. I wasn't spying, I was protecting us. That's what I told myself. The line between vigilance and violation blurred with each passing week until I couldn't remember which side I'd started on. In August, I found the first real clue. A text from Sarah, his project manager, that said can't wait for tomorrow. Nothing incriminating on its own, but the emoji after it, a wine glass, felt too familiar. I scrolled back through his deleted messages, used a recovery app I'd found on Reddit, and pieced together conversations that were mostly work but occasionally slipped into personal. Sarah asking about his weekend. David mentioning a restaurant we'd never been to. I confronted him over dinner, trying to sound casual. How's Sarah? I asked, swirling pasta around my fork. He didn't look up from his plate. Fine. Why? Just wondering if she's single. Seems like you two are close. David set his fork down precisely. Don't do that. Don't create problems where there aren't any. His voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. I apologized, blamed my anxiety, took an extra Ativan that night. But I kept digging. I created a fake Instagram account to follow his coworkers. I checked his credit card statements for charges at restaurants I hadn't visited. I became a detective in my own relationship, and every clue I found, every ambiguous receipt, every late meeting, felt like validation. I wasn't crazy, something was happening. The truth revealed itself through Tyler unexpectedly. He texted me in October, not David. Hey, you okay? David seems weird when I call. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back, just work stress, I think. 3 dots appeared immediately. You sure? He told Mom you're being paranoid. Paranoid. The word lit something in me. I waited until David was asleep, took his laptop from his office, and tried his password, the same one he'd used for 3 years. It didn't work. He'd changed it. That small act of digital self-defense felt like a confession. I sat on our couch at 3 a.m., his laptop in my hands, and realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize. I broke into his email through his phone instead, while he slept next to me, snoring softly. It took 3 attempts to guess his new passcode, our anniversary date, but reversed. Inside his messages, I found what I'd been dreading and perversely hopping for. Sarah wasn't just a coworker. She was his work wife, a term I hated even before I understood its full meaning. There were messages about meeting for strategy sessions at a hotel bar near their office. Messages about how she understood him in ways I never could. Messages about our relationship dissected by 2 people who decided I was the problem. I took screenshots. Hundreds of them. I organized them into folders labeled with dates. I created a timeline of his betrayal, each piece of evidence another weight on my chest. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because somewhere in my obsessive documentation, I'd lost the moral high ground. I'd become a spy in my own home, and I knew that whatever came next, that fact would be used against me. The night of my confession, I'd planned something entirely different. I'd planned to show him the screenshots, to demand he admit what he'd done, to force the kind of honest conversation I'd been begging for since summer. But when he came home, smelling like that hotel bar and Sarah's perfume, something snapped. He kissed my cheek, called me babe in that absent way he'd developed, and I couldn't play the role of dutiful girlfriend anymore. I slept with Tyler, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. It wasn't how I'd rehearsed it. It wasn't strategic. It was raw, ugly truth, a grenade I threw because I couldn't hold it anymore. David froze, his keys still in his hand. What? In March, while he was staying with us. It happened once. The lie came easily, the timeline shifted to make it sound recent, to hurt him the way he'd been hurting me. I watched his face transform from confusion to rage to something cold and final. He didn't yell. That was the worst part. He just walked to our bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. I followed, still holding my phone with the screenshots of his affair, but now they felt like evidence of my own crimes. David, wait, don't. He zipped the bag, turned to face me. You fucked my brother in our apartment. I can explain the hotel thing, the distance, I could work with. But this. He shook his head. This is unforgivable. He called the locksmith from the hallway, his voice steady. I sat on our kitchen floor, the screenshots still open on my phone, and realized I'd played this entirely wrong. When the locksmith arrived, David paid him in cash, standing between me and the door like I was a threat. I watched the deadbolt get replaced, watched my key become useless, and understood that I'd given him exactly what he wanted, a clean exit with me as the villain. The aftermath unfolded in stages. First, the silence. David blocked my number, my email, every social media account. Then the narrative spread through our mutual friends. He told them I'd cheated with Tyler, that he'd tried to work through it, but I was unrepentant. I lost friends I'd had since college. My own mother called, her voice heavy with disappointment. How could you, Maya? I tried to explain about Sarah, about the screenshots, but it sounded like deflection. It sounded like I was trying to excuse the inexcusable. Tyler called, of course. He'd heard from their mother, who'd heard from David. Did you tell him we slept together? His voice was strained, hurt. We didn't, I said, my own voice hollow. Not really. Not while David and I were together. There was a long pause, but you let him think we did. It wasn't a question. I had to do something. He was cheating on me. Tyler exhaled slowly. So you burned us both to prove a point. I moved into a studio apartment 2 weeks later, after David changed the lease and my key stopped working. The doorman wouldn't let me upstairs to get my things. David had left 2 boxes in the lobby, my clothes, my laptop, nothing that mattered. All my books, my photos, the life we'd built remained locked behind that new deadbolt. I considered fighting it legally, but I couldn't afford a lawyer. I'd spent my savings on the apartment deposit. My work suffered. I missed deadlines, showed up late, couldn't focus in meetings. My boss, who'd always liked me, pulled me aside. Is everything okay? I lied, said it was a family emergency. 2 weeks later, I was put on a performance improvement plan. The screenshots of David's affair sat in a folder on my desktop, but they felt like ancient history now, proof of a crime no one cared about because I'd committed a worse one. The truth about Tyler emerged slowly. He'd been sending me money, not because of any ongoing relationship, but because I'd helped him get sober 2 years ago before I'd even met David. He felt he owed me, but David had seen the Venmo transactions, the occasional 200 with messages like "for being you" and "thanks for the talk." He'd assumed the worst, and I'd let him. Worse, I'd weaponized his assumption. Sarah's pregnancy announcement came 3 months after David left. A friend sent me the screenshot, a cozy photo of David and Sarah, her hand on a small bump, the caption "Our greatest adventure begins." The comments were full of congratulations, of people calling them perfect together. I sat in my studio, the walls too close, and finally let myself cry. Not because I'd lost him. I realized I'd lost him 6 months before when his mind first drifted away, but because he'd won. He'd rewritten history so cleanly that even I questioned my own narrative sometimes. I stayed in therapy, the one thing I could afford through my insurance. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, never judged. "You made choices," she said, "but you weren't operating in a vacuum." It was the closest anyone came to acknowledging that David's betrayal had weight too. But by confessing the way I did, by lying about the timeline and making Tyler collateral damage, I'd forfeited my right to be the wronged party. The lock stayed changed. David sold our apartment, which had been mine first, 6 months later. I got a check for my half of the equity, a transaction so clean it felt like a final punctuation mark. Tyler's band got signed, and I saw him on a billboard near my office. I didn't reach out. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. I'm telling this story now because yesterday, 3 years later, David posted a photo of his daughter's first birthday party. Sarah is beaming in the background, holding their baby girl. The comments are full of the same friends who abandoned me, calling him such a great dad, so devoted. And I realized that some people get to start fresh, get to bury their sins under new beginnings, while others carry their mistakes like brands. I know what you'll think, that I'm still bitter, that I haven't moved on, that I'm making excuses. Maybe you're right. But here's what I need you to understand: when I told David I'd slept with his brother, I wasn't just confessing. I was asking him to admit he'd slept with Sarah. I was offering a trade, my ugly truth for his. And instead of taking the deal, he used my confession as a get-out-of-jail-free card. He left that night and changed the locks. And in doing so, he proved that my paranoia had been right all along. He just wasn't the one who'd have to live with the consequences.